has had a strong partnership with Italy for the last 60 plus years. And he intends to consolidate and build on that foundation to continue strengthening the partnership between this great nation and Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor to call to the stage this gentleman, the Honorable William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya.
Thank you very much. Chairman of the Med-Or Italian Foundation, my first time to meet you. Dean and President of the University, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to join you here in Rome on this occasion when I undertake a state visit to this great country. And as has been said earlier, the Holy Father is visiting our continent, a very significant visit, being almost the first time that he is undertaking that visit. And it coincides with my very first appointment of an ambassador to Vatican, something that we have been thinking about, but the significance of Rome and the importance of Vatican for the Catholic fraternity and for Kenya is the backdrop of my visit here. And I thank the Med-Or Italian Foundation and the Luis School of Government for convening this important conversation under the theme that you see up here, Kenya, a country looking to the future. I address you in two distinct capacities, yet complementary. First, as a Kenyan, and secondly, as an African. Allow me, however, to begin with a broader global context, as has been elaborated by the speakers before me. We are living through a period in which many of the certainties that have defined global order for decades, including multilateral institutions, predictable trade systems, and a long-standing security alliance, are today faltering. Conflict has returned to the center of international affairs, from Ukraine in recent years to Middle East in recent weeks. Trade routes have assumed new strategic significance, as reflected in the rising tensions around the Strait of Hormuz. Security, meanwhile, is no longer confined to territorial borders. It is now extending into the cyberspace, energy systems, and critical infrastructure. At the same time, technological change is advancing at a pace that governance systems are struggling to match. Climate pressures are no longer projections. They are an immediate and lived reality for hundreds of millions across the world. In a world as disrupted as the one we have, we must ask ourselves, what defines a truly capable state? My proposition is that it rests on at least 5 core attributes: responsiveness, collaboration, innovation, resilience, and ambition. A responsive state listens and acts with clarity and speed. A collaborative state recognizes that no nation succeeds alone and must therefore cultivate partnerships and alliances. An innovative state does not merely regulate technology. It harnesses it to deliver better outcomes. A resilient state absorbs shocks and continues to function even in the face of disruption. Above all, a capable state defines the scale of its future and sets its ambition accordingly, because no nation rises beyond the reach of its vision. For perspective, allow me to ground these reflections in our national experience as Kenya. When many think of Kenya, including I'm sure many in this audience, what of them comes to mind is extraordinary wildlife or world-class athletes. And while this is true, it's only part of the story. Kenya is indeed a land of remarkable beauty, the cradle of humankind, and the origin of wonder. That is why we say, whenever you come from wherever, you don't simply visit Kenya, you come back home. But Kenya is far more than this. It is a dynamic, forward-looking nation at the center of Africa's transformation. Situated along the Indian Ocean in East Africa, Kenya occupies a strategic position at the crossroads of global trade routes linking Africa to the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. With a population of over 55 million, predominantly young, educated, and ambitious, and one of the most diversified economies in our region, Kenya is charting a deliberate and confident path forward, anchored in resilience and reform. Through deliberate and at times difficult but necessary policy choices, we have transformed Kenya into the 6th largest economy in Africa. We've strengthened our foreign exchange reserves, stabilized our currency, reduced inflation, and restored investor confidence, as reflected in the recent upgrade of our credit rating as a nation. Over the past 3 years, we have made significant strides towards universal health coverage. I'll give you an example. In 2023, that's 3 years ago, fewer than 8 million Kenyans had access to publicly funded health insurance. Today, that number has increased nearly fourfold, from 8 million to 30 million. In housing, we are advancing an ambitious program to expand access to affordable and modern homes, with over 240,000 units currently under construction and a pipeline of 700,000 units, driving job creation, economic activity, and improved living standards. In education, we have undertaken comprehensive reforms to expand access and enhance quality, including the transition to a competence-based education and training system aligned with the demands of a rapidly evolving world. Kenya is equally a vibrant democracy, grounded in constitutional governance and active civic participation. Our institutions continue to deepen accountability and to uphold the rule of law, something we are very, very proud of, and we share in common with Italy as you celebrate your 80th Independence Day. Yet, our greatest strength lies in our people. Innately curious, deeply creative, and highly adaptable, and also consistently competitive on the global stage. Whenever opportunity rises, Kenyans rise to meet it with distinction and purpose. Kenya is also home to one of the most technologically advanced populations in our continent. As Africa's Silicon Savannah, it is a hub of innovation where digital solutions are developed and scaled for real-world impact. From a mobile finance platform such as M-Pesa to digital public services, innovation in Kenya is practical, inclusive, and transformative. We recognize that citizens experience the state through service delivery. We are therefore redesigning government systems to be more accessible, more transparent, and responsive through digital transformation. Yet, progress alone is not transformation. To assume that we need only to maintain the status quo would be a profound miscalculation and a dangerous complacency. For too long, we, especially in leadership, have tolerated the average, and by so doing, constrained our ambition. But that era has come to an end. Today, we are raising the scale of our ambition with a clear objective to transform Kenya into a first-world economy within our lifetime. And we are doing this through three critical priority pillars. First, we are undertaking a rapid expansion of critical transport and connectivity infrastructure, including 28,000 kilometers of road, new airports, and seaports. And over the decade, we have committed to more than doubling our paved road network, modernizing our airports and ports and logistics hubs, because we recognize that connectivity is the backbone of economic transformation. Second, we are strengthening our export-led agricultural transformation and food security system through large-scale irrigation, anchored in the construction of at least 50 mega dams to bring over 2.5 million acres of land into productive use. Indeed, a key outcome of my visit to Italy is to advance the development of at least 3 of these strategic projects. Third, we are working to more than triple our installed electricity capacity within the next 7 years to uptake modern technology, power industrial growth, and sustain economic expansion. Industrialization requires energy that is reliable, affordable, and sufficient to match the pace of enterprise. To deliver this ambition, we are adopting innovative financing models anchored in partnership. We are identifying commercially viable public projects and working with both domestic and international private sector partners to bring them to fruition, creating a genuine win-win outcome, sustainable returns for investors, and improved services for citizens without necessarily imposing additional strain on public debt or taxation. Public-private partnership has become a cornerstone of our development paradigm. Through our National Infrastructure Fund and Sovereign Wealth Fund, we are mobilizing public and private, domestic and foreign, capital for finance, especially for major priority projects. And we have a portfolio of close to 40 billion euros of projects over the next 7 years. Mr. President, distinguished guests, Kenya's national aspirations are inseparable from the destiny of Africa. Our progress cannot be secured in isolation. It is fundamentally linked to the advancement of our continent as a whole. For Kenya to move forward, Africa must advance. For Kenya to realize its full potential, Africa must not remain at the margins of global order. In fact, Africa must stand at its forefront, shaping its direction and defining its future. It is from this standpoint that I want to advance issues that bear directly on Africa's place in international system and on the evolving dynamics of global geopolitics. The first point I wish to make is this: Africa is resolved to take full ownership of its destiny and to shape its future on its own terms. It is the reason why we made a decision as leaders in this continent to reorganize the Africa Union. And colleagues in the continent gave me the assignment to work on the reform of the Africa Union. And we are doing so in many ways. We are doing so by deepening intra-Africa trade, expanding manufacturing, and accelerating value addition across our economies. Africa is not merely the next frontier of global trade and investment. It is one of the defining opportunities of our time. Through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are unlocking a single market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of $3.7 trillion. According to the World Bank, Africa Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to increase Africa's exports by over $560 billion by 2035, with substantial gains in manufacturing and industrial goods. For partners such as Italy and the European Union, this represents a strategic opportunity. The EU is already Africa's largest trading partner, accounting for up to 30% of total trade, with volumes exceeding 400 billion euros annually. Yet, and I say again, yet, much of this trade remains concentrated in raw materials, an imbalance we must urgently address together now. Today, manufactured goods account for less than 20% of Africa's exports, compared to over 70% in more industrialized regions. This is why, across the continent, and certainly in Kenya, we are investing in infrastructure to support industrialization, including industrial parks, special economic zones, and regional value chains to build a competitive manufacturing ecosystem. In Kenya, manufacturing is set to increase to 15% over the medium term. Across Africa, manufacturing output currently valued at around $500 billion has the potential to exceed $1 trillion by 2030 with the right investment and with the correct partnerships. This is where we see the future of Africa's partnership with Europe and the wider international community. Not as a relationship defined by extraction, but by co-production and co-creation. We seek partnership that invests in production within Africa, creating jobs in our continent, and delivering sustainable returns for investors and for everybody. When we create jobs in Africa, we expand markets, we strengthen stability, and reduce the pressures associated with illegal migration. Each year, for numbers, up to 12 million young Africans enter the labor market, yet only about 3 million formal jobs are created. The implications are clear. Millions are left in informal, low productivity, and often precarious employment, with nearly 96% of unemployed youth in informal sector, and many still living in poverty. This is not merely an economic concern. It is a social and a political imperative. Without jobs and opportunity, we risk cycles of instability, unrest, and lost potential. By investing in manufacturing and value addition, we lay the foundation for large-scale job creation. Industrialization remains the most viable pathway to absorb our growing workforce, raise incomes, and build resilient economies. It is how we convert demographic pressure into a demographic dividend. If we get this right, Africa's youth will not constitute a burden on the global system. They will be an asset, one of its greatest engines of growth, innovation, and shared prosperity. That is the opportunity before us, and that is the future together we must build. This is why Africa's demographic trajectory matters, not only to Africa, but to the world. By 2050, 1 in every 4 people globally will be living in Africa. This is not simply a demographic projection. It is a defining reality for global demand, supply chains, and economic growth. The question is not whether Africa will shape the future, but whether we will build that future together. The time, in my opinion, for any serious investor looking for a workforce, looking for a market, and looking for a return is now. This is a time to invest in Africa. However, for Kenya and for Africa more broadly, to fully realize this potential, we must acknowledge that the current global financial architecture does not work equitably for all. It was designed in a different era, for a different world, and too often it continues to favor the already developed while constraining those still developing. Today, African countries face disproportionately high costs of capital, not always due to underlying fundamentals as we are told, but as a result of structural biases in global risk assessment. Credit rating systems, largely calibrated to advanced economies, frequently, if not always, fail to reflect the resilience, growth potential, and reform trajectories of African markets. The result is a persistent risk premium that raises borrowing costs, limits investment, and slows down development. Institutions such as the World Bank and the United Nations Development Programme have acknowledged that countries in Africa and across the global South often pay significantly higher interests than advanced economies, sometimes up to 5 times, even where debt levels are comparable, or sometimes even lower. I want you to listen to that statement. It's a statement of fact. It is not my proposition. It is what has been assessed by the World Bank, UNIDO, and others. In times of crisis, we have witnessed abrupt credit rating downgrades, sometimes preceding actual defaults, triggering capital flight and further constraining fiscal space. This is not merely a market outcome. It reflects a deeper structural imbalance and failure. More than ever before, a more just, balanced, and responsive global financial system, one that recognizes both risk and opportunity, one that reflects not only past performance, but future potential, and one that expands access to affordable capital rather than limit it. That system, ladies and gentlemen, is an absolute imperative now. Okay? Maybe I shouldn't have said now. Okay, somebody is working on something. Just wait for a minute. I think somebody's. Yes, I think we are there. My point was, we need to correct that imbalance or failure sooner rather than later. And by the way, this is not a call for concession. It is a call for fairness, for accuracy, and for a system that is truly global in design and outcome. Without such reform, we risk perpetuating a cycle in which those who most need capital to grow remain those least able to access it. That outcome is neither sustainable nor just for Africa or for anybody, for that matter. Nowhere is this imbalance more evident or more consequential than in the global response to climate change. Somebody needs to do something about something else.
We need the energy of African countries.
Climate change stands as both a profound test of our time and also as the gateway to a new global economy. Across Africa, climate-related shocks are eroding between 3 to 5% of our GDP, draining public resources and reversing hard-won development gains. Yet within this challenge lies significant opportunity. Climate action is no longer solely an environmental imperative. It is a central driver of future economic growth. Investment in clean energy has now surpassed $2 trillion annually. Yet Africa, home to nearly 20% of the world's population, receives only 3% of this investment. This imbalance also must be corrected. The transition to clean energy offers a pathway to industrialization, to job creation, energy security, and long-term competitiveness. It is about building new industries. It's about modern energy systems and resilient economies, an entirely new growth model anchored in sustainability. Africa is not standing still. Kenya provides a very clear illustration of what is possible. Today, over 90% of our electricity in Kenya is generated from clean energy sources. We are a global leader in geothermal power, with projects such as Olkaria placing Kenya among the top producers worldwide of geothermal energy. We have also made sustained investments in wind and solar, including the Lake Turkana wind power project, one of the largest on the continent, as well as continued expansion of solar generation. These investments are not only reducing emissions, they are powering industry, lowering costs, and strengthening energy security. Across Africa, similar efforts are underway, scaling renewable energy, advancing green industrialization, and strengthening climate resilience across agriculture, infrastructure, and livelihoods. These are deliberate steps to reposition Africa as not just a victim of climate, but to be a driver of global solutions. But Africa cannot do this alone. The international community must now match ambition with delivery. Climate leadership must be measured not by declarations that we make, but by results. This requires a fundamental shift, reforming financial systems, scaling up climate finance, and ensuring equitable access to investment. Ladies and gentlemen, my final point on Africa concerns the continent's place on the global stage, particularly within the architecture of the international peace and security. For decades, the world has relied on a framework designed to preserve international peace and security, prevent conflict and aggression, particularly among major powers, to enable collective action when peace is threatened, and to uphold the responsibility of leading nations as custodians of global stability. That framework has served the international community so far. Yet, today, we all know it is under significant strain. What clearer evidence of dysfunction can there be than a system in which those entrusted to underwrite global peace and prevent aggression are themselves accused? What clearer signal do we require than a world that appears to be drifting towards an order defined not by rules, but by might? A world where the strong act with impunity, while the broader international community, including the United Nations, have no recourse. It is for this reason that Kenya, together with the rest of Africa, are right in calling for urgent reform of the United Nations, more particularly the United Nations Security Council, to ensure that it is fit for purpose and it reflects the realities of today. We cannot, in good conscience, speak of a truly united nations when the voice of 54 African countries remain absent from the highest table of decision making on global peace and security development decisions without the benefit of insights and ideas of 54 African nations. Africa must, as a matter of principle and justice, have a permanent representation at the United Nations Security Council. This is neither a concession nor an act of affirmative action. It is a necessity for the legitimacy, the credibility, and the effectiveness of the United Nations itself. We must recall the solemn commitment that gave rise to the United Nations 80 decades ago, which said to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice brought untold suffering to humanity. That commitment, never again, was not a mere slogan. It was a covenant with humanity. I wish to reiterate the following. And mark my words. When power begins to outweigh principle, when established norms lose their authority, when might is allowed to define right, and when the international community stands divided or paralyzed in the face of aggression, we move dangerously close to the precipice of global disorder and anarchy. This is a future that we must collectively and decisively reject. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I was invited to speak about Kenya, a country looking to the future. I chose also to speak about Africa, a continent looking beyond. I did so because the two journeys are inseparable. Our challenges are shared, and so too are our opportunities. Today, both as a nation and as a continent, we are ready to confront our challenges with honesty, and ready to take responsibility for shaping our future. And Africa is going to do its part. What we ask of the world is straightforward: partnership and solidarity. Partnership that recognizes our potential, and solidarity that translates ambition into action. When we succeed, the future we are shaping will not belong to us alone. It will not belong to the few, nor the mighty and the powerful. It will belong to all. And that is a future worth building together right now. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency.